Thanks so much for staying with Biz Asia America. I'm Mike Walter.
And I'm Philip Yen. Michelle McCory is standing by to join us from New York City on what has been another historic day.
That's absolutely right. This day marked the conclusion of the 5th annual Strategic and Economic Dialogue. In short, some of the most important talks between the United States and China of the year.
And we've heard just about everything discussed, from Edward Snowden to cybersecurity to trade to military moves, and including climate change.
And you know, it takes months to put something like this together. I mean, they started working on this about 5 months ago, just trading conversations just to get all of these people in the same room to carry on these conversations this week.
You think there's a lot of thank you notes they're going to get ready to write up, that to send each other when they both get back to their respective desks?
I suspect they're probably already working on those as well. You know who will know is Nathan and Jessica. They've been watching this, and they're at the hotel where the dinner is going on tonight, that final evening together.
That's right. In fact, this is the honor of the U.S. Strategic and Economic Dialogue. We're keeping our voices now because Yang Jiechi is actually speaking, and we want to give him some respect as he goes through his remarks. But what he said earlier, wrapping up this two-day event, was that basically the U.S. and China have to get out of this zero-sum game, where if one wins, the other one loses. It's got to turn to a sort of win-win situation. And Jessica, that applies not just to the strategic sphere, but the economic one as well.
Absolutely, and we have some fairly big progress to report on the economic track today. Of course, we heard earlier from Vice Premier Wang Yang making a number of humorous remarks to the audience here this evening, but throughout the day he has really carried and co-chaired the economic talks, out of which came some big progress on a bilateral investment treaty. Both sides agreed on Thursday, the final day of the talks, that China would include all areas of investment, all areas of its economic market in that deal. We don't know when those negotiations will begin, but it's important that it will begin under these circumstances. Have a listen.
China announced its intention to negotiate a high-standard bilateral investment treaty with us that will include all stages of investment and all sectors. A significant breakthrough, and the first time China has agreed to do so with another country.
The U.S. pledges to welcome investment from China, including investment of SOEs and sovereign wealth funds. The U.S. also pledges that security review will only be based on national security.
And so there you hear the Chinese counterpart to Secretary Liu really talking about the fact that Chinese companies have had a hard time investing in the United States. We've had a lot of problems. China's Huawei, ZTE, Smithfield Foods most recently, all examples of companies that have tried to merge with U.S. companies that have had some problems. Of course, that goes in the reverse as well, and that was a topic of conversation. But let's get to your news on the security track.
Yeah, you know, we've been waiting all week for the military-to-military aspect of these talks. They were held behind closed doors, but what we can say is that both countries have announced that they're going to set up a mechanism to warn each other when they're having major military activities. Now, why is this? Well, remember back in April 2001 with the Hainan Island incident and the American pilots? They want to avoid that as China grows and the U.S. rebalances, of course, to the Pacific. But, of course, there's still some mistrust. Let's take a look.
As military discussions between China and the United States continue in Washington, the Chinese Navy and its Russian counterparts hold the largest joint exercise China has ever staged with a foreign country, an example of China's growing might. Here in Washington, that growth is part of the military-to-military dialogue at the center of this week's annual strategic dialogue meeting that covers security as well as economic issues. America's commander in the Pacific says the U.S. accepts and welcomes China's naval expansion and calls it inevitable. He acknowledged that the two countries interpret maritime law differently, but is optimistic the two sides can avoid tensions on the high seas.
We are having an ongoing dialogue with the Chinese military about, what are the kind of the rules of the road of how we manage our relationship as the Chinese Navy inevitably gets larger and inevitably will come out further from their territorial seas. The U.S. presence in the Asia-Pacific is not going anywhere, so we have to manage our ability to operate around each other, and I think it's a doable thing.
U.S. commanders stress they see China's military growth as an opportunity for Beijing to take on a bigger role in the world stage. as China has done with anti-piracy efforts off the coast of Somalia and the joint humanitarian exercise recently in Brunei alongside US warships. The US, however, is also trying to convince China that the Pentagon's strategic rebalancing in the Pacific isn't a military strategy to contain China's rise. This week, US officials tried to reassure Beijing that placing missile defenses in Alaska was aimed at protecting the US from the DPRK. The US has deployed the same missiles on the Pacific island of Guam, a US territory.
There's a perception that all these things we're doing is an attempt to contain China. And the reality, and we tell them this as well, is that there's no need or intention. There's no good for the United States. I mean, we're too interconnected in too many ways for us to have a containment policy, a military containment strategy.
And while China and Russia hold joint exercises, the US is looking forward to having China participate in the Rim of the Pacific naval exercises in 2014 for the first time. 22 countries joined the last US-led drills. It's hoped that closer ties between the two militaries and others in the region and beyond will result from China's participation.
And Yang Jiechi, who is speaking behind me, the state councillor, also promised that the US and China will communicate more deeply over what divides them, including Syria and Iran. And just want to bring you in here because there was some sort of reassuring words also on the economic front about China's economic slowdown, right?
Absolutely. We heard from the folks at the PBOC today, as well as the finance minister and the Ministry of Commerce, who briefed us separately, is that China is looking to reassure people that the slowdown is just part of the economic reforms that they were implementing. That's what it's really about. And in addition, they did get a word in with the Federal Reserve, because we know that Chairman Bernanke was at the table with the U.S. Central Bank, and they were able to express to the Americans that they would like to see a sooner exit rather than a longer-term exit from the quantitative easing program, which, of course, is the stimulus that the United States has been doing to promote its own growth.
Back to you, Mike.
All right, Jessica Stone and Nathan King, live for us in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much.